There is a Ford sitting in a museum in Dearborn, Michigan, that is worth more than most skyscrapers, somewhere north of $40 million. And the crazy part is, the last time this car raced, almost nobody thought it could win. It was 1969. The car was a 5-year-old GT40, a design the entire racing world thought was done for. The driver was a 24-year-old kid from Brussels who started the race in last place on purpose as a one-man protest. One driver who sprinted to his car at that start never made it home. The kid who walked to his won the whole thing, by about 390 feet, after 24 hours. This is the story of the Old Lady, the most valuable Ford race car on the planet, and the race that made her priceless. Maranello, Italy. 1963. Enzo Ferrari was in the middle of a deal that would have changed racing forever. Henry Ford II wanted to buy Ferrari. The talks dragged on for months. Lawyers flew back and forth across the Atlantic. Teams of moneymen crawled through Ferrari's books. And then, right at the finish line, Enzo walked away. He refused to give up control of his racing program. The company, the factory, the road cars, fine, take them. But the racing team was his, and it was not for sale at any price. Henry Ford II did not take that well. Some accounts say that Enzo told Ford's team that their company made ugly little cars in an ugly factory. Whether that exact line was said or not, the message was clear. Ferrari thought Ford was beneath him. And Henry Ford II, a man who ran one of the largest companies on earth, was not the type to let a slap like that slide. He walked out of the meeting and told his racing team 3 words: beat Ferrari. Whatever it cost, however long it took, build something that could shame Enzo Ferrari at the race he cared about most. He told his people to build a race car that would beat Ferrari at Le Mans, the biggest long-distance race in the world, the one Ferrari had won 6 years running. Ford poured millions into the project. They built a low-slung, mid-engined machine they called the GT40 because it stood just 40 inches tall at the roofline. It looked like nothing else on the road. It sounded like a thunderstorm, and for 2 straight years, it was a failure. At Le Mans in 1964, every Ford GT40 entered in the race broke down. Every single one. 1965, same story. Not one Ford finished. Ferrari won both times, and the Italian press had a field day with it. The GT40 was fast in a straight line and fell apart everywhere else. It was becoming the most costly mistake in racing history. Then Ford did something smart. They handed the program to Carroll Shelby, a Texan who had gone from racing driver to chicken farmer to car builder, and his crew of California hot rodders working out of a warehouse near the Los Angeles airport. Shelby's team stripped the car down and rebuilt it as the GT40 Mark II with a thundering 7-liter V8 under the hood. In 1966, Ford brought 8 of them to Le Mans. Ferrari brought their best. By sunrise, every single Ferrari had dropped out. Ford swept the top 3 spots, finishing 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The win was total. The shame was complete. Henry Ford II stood in the pit lane and watched his cars cross the line. That should have been the end of the story. Ford got their payback. The Hollywood ending. Roll credits. At least, that's what everyone thought. Ford kept winning. 1967, the GT40 Mark IV won Le Mans again with a bigger, more powerful version of the car. 1968, something worth noting happened. Ford's factory effort had ended for good. The Mark II and Mark IV programs were done. The company had made its point. Ferrari had been beaten, and the board of directors in Dearborn saw no reason to keep spending millions on a race in France. So a small private team from England picked up the torch. John Wyer Automotive Engineering bought a pair of the older, lighter GT40 Mark Is and went to Le Mans with a tiny share of the budget Ford had spent. Chassis 1075, wearing the Gulf Oil paint scheme, won the race with Pedro Rodriguez and Lucien Bianchi driving. A year-old car, on a private team budget, without factory backing, had just won the most demanding race in the world. 3 straight Le Mans wins for the GT40. The car was no longer the scrappy underdog, it was the king. And by 1969, the entire sport had set itself up to knock it off the throne. Porsche showed up with the 917. If you have never seen a Porsche 917, picture the most mean-looking race car you can think of. then add more engine. It had a 4.5-liter flat 12. It was wildly fast, and Porsche built 25 of them just to meet the minimum count. The 917 was not built for Sunday drives. It was built to crush the Ford GT40 at Le Mans, and nothing else. Ferrari had new cars in the works. Matra, the French builder, had a serious factory team. Even the smaller Porsche 908 was thought to be faster than the aging Ford. Everything was in place to bury the GT40 for good. The rest of the sport just figured it was already over. John Wyer Automotive Engineering did not get that memo. Wyer was a small private team based in Slough, England, about as far from the glamour of Le Mans as you could get without leaving the country. They entered 2 GT40 Mark Is that year, running on a budget that would not have covered the food tent at Porsche's paddock. One of those cars was Chassis 1075, the exact same Ford that had won Le Mans the year before with Pedro Rodriguez and Lucien Bianchi behind the wheel. She wore the Gulf oil colors. If you are a car person, you know the look. Powder blue body, tangerine orange stripe. It is one of the most known paint schemes in the history of racing, and it looked great on the long, low shape of the GT40. The crew called her the Old Lady because at 5 years old in racing terms, she was ancient. Her 4.9-liter V8 made decent power, but nothing close to the Porsche 917. She was lighter than the big Porsche, and she was proven tough. Beyond that, the math did not favor her. The man they asked to drive her was not worried about the math. Jacky Ickx was 24 years old, born on New Year's Day, 1945 in Brussels, Belgium. His father, Jacques, was one of Europe's most respected racing riders, which meant young Jacky grew up in paddocks and pit lanes the way other kids grew up on playgrounds. He raced motorcycles as a teenager, moved to cars, and climbed so fast through the ranks that by 1967 he was driving Formula One for the Brabham team. He finished fourth in the 1968 Formula One World Championship at 23 years old. He was fearless, he was fast, and he had a stubborn streak that made team bosses either love him or want to strangle him. His co-driver was Jacky Oliver, a 26-year-old Englishman who had raced Formula One for Lotus. Oliver was a solid, able driver. He had one problem. He had never finished Le Mans, not once, which, looking back, was either very brave or very stupid to put on your resume when trying to drive a 24-hour race. So the field for Le Mans 1969 shaped up like this. A fleet of brand new Porsche 917s, likely the fastest race cars on the planet, backed by a full factory team. A pack of proven Porsche 908s, fresh Ferrari and Matra cars. And 2 tired old Gulf-colored Ford GT40 Mark Is entered by a private team from Slough, driven by a 24-year-old Belgian and a 26-year-old Englishman who had never seen the Le Mans checkered flag. The odds made no sense. Nobody outside the Wyer garage gave them a chance. Le Mans, France, June 14th, 1969. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 47 cars lined up on the pit straight under a warm French sky. The Le Mans start was one of the great sights in racing. The cars sat parked at an angle on one side of the track, noses pointed toward the circuit. The drivers stood across the road, facing their machines. When the French flag dropped, the drivers sprinted across the pavement, jumped into their open doors, fired the engines, and launched into the first corner in a cloud of tire smoke and rush. It was pure theater. It was also deeply dangerous. Most drivers skipped their seatbelts to save time. Some did not even close their doors all the way before flooring it down the straight. Jacky Ickx had spoken out about how risky the running start was. He had pushed the race bosses to change it. They told him tradition was tradition. Ickx decided that tradition was not worth a single life. When the flag dropped, 46 drivers sprinted. Jacky Ickx walked, not jogged, walked. He strolled across the track to the old lady, opened her door, climbed in, pulled on his full harness, buckled it, and set his mirrors. Every other car on the grid was already screaming through the first corner by the time the GT40's V8 rumbled to life. 47th out of 47. The thing that everyone missed at the time was that his walk was not just a stand. It was a warning. On the very first lap, British private driver John Wolfe lost control of his Porsche 917 at the Maison Blanche corner. The car left the road at huge speed and was destroyed. Wolfe, who had not buckled his seatbelt in the rush of the running start, did not survive the crash. He was the first person to ever race a Porsche 917 at Le Mans. and he never finished a single lap. Ickx, the man who had walked, who had buckled his belts, who had given up 46 spots on purpose, turned out to be the smartest driver on the grid that afternoon. The race was barely a minute old, and it had already proven him right. For the first several hours, the Porsche 917s did exactly what they were built to do. They ran at the front of the field, stretching their legs on the Mulsanne Straight at well over 200 miles per hour, building gaps over the rest of the field that seemed almost unfair. The GT40s ran mid-pack, steady and smooth, while Ickx and Oliver took turns and kept their cool. There was no point chasing 917s in the daylight. Everyone knew that. You race Le Mans at night with your head, not in the afternoon with your ego. And then the sun went down, and the 917s started braking. Le Mans at night is a different race. The Mulsanne Straight becomes a tunnel of darkness broken only by headlights and the glow of far-off corner lights. Drivers who were at ease at 200 miles per hour in daylight suddenly have to trust their memory, their gut, and the thin beams of their headlamps while slower cars show up out of nowhere in front of them. The track cools, the tires lose grip, and everything that felt under control in the afternoon becomes a leap of faith at midnight. One by one, the cars that were supposed to crush this race crawled back to the pits with problems that no amount of horsepower could fix. Gearboxes failed, engines overheated. The rear-end airflow that had never been properly worked out in testing turned the 917 into a white-knuckle ride in the dark when the track cooled and grip vanished. Drivers came in shaking their heads. Several cars spun off the track. The 917 was insanely fast and deeply flawed, a weapon that had been rushed to Le Mans before the builders had time to tame it. That is not a typo, by the way. The factory-backed car with the 12-cylinder engine and the endless budget was the one that could not make it through the night. The 5-year-old Ford with 4 fewer cylinders? She just kept turning laps. Through the French darkness, with rain closing in and the cold settling, Ickx and Oliver climbed through the field. The old lady was not the fastest thing on the track. She was never going to be. She was something more important than fast. She was there, still running, still strong, still logging laps while faster cars sat cooling in the pits with cracked gearboxes and blown gaskets. By Sunday morning, after more than 20 hours of non-stop racing, the field had been torn apart. The 917 threat was gone, the Ferraris were gone, and the race for the overall win had come down to 2 cars. Jacky Ickx in the Old Lady and the Porsche 908 of Hans Hermann and Gerard Larousse. The 908 was smaller and lighter than the 917, with a 3-liter flat 8 engine. It was not as strong as the Old Lady on the straights, but it was quick in the corners and, like the GT40, it had made it through the night. Hermann was 51 years old, a veteran of 2 decades of racing who had walked away from crashes that should have ended his time behind the wheel. He was seasoned, he was clever, and he wanted this win badly. For the final 3 hours of the race, the GT40 and the Porsche ran nose to tail. Not a lap apart, not a safe gap, nose to tail. Trading spots, pushing each other to lap times faster than qualifying, in cars that had been running for more than 21 straight hours. The crew in the wire pit could barely watch. Every lap felt like the last one the car could possibly live through. Think about what that means for a second. These 2 machines had been running flat out since 4 in the afternoon the day before. Their drivers had been trading shifts all night, grabbing minutes of sleep on cots behind the garage, eating whatever food they could hold down, then climbing back into a cockpit that was over 100 degrees and getting back up to race speed in the dark. By Sunday morning, everything in those cars was on the edge. Brakes were fading, tires were worn. The engines had been spinning at redline for longer than most race cars run in their whole lives. And both crews were pushing harder than they had been in the first hour. That is the kind of racing that makes grown men forget to breathe. 3 hours of all-out attack, in machines held together by pit-stop fixes and sheer grit, with the biggest prize in long-distance racing hanging on every corner. If you are finding this story as wild as I think you are, hit subscribe. We dig into forgotten races and legendary machines like this every week. The final lap, 23 hours and change on the clock. Ickx and Hermann were still within striking range of each other. The Old Lady's V8 against the Porsche's Flat 8. Brussels versus Stuttgart. Age versus youth. Nobody in the grandstands was sitting down. On the Mulsanne Straight, that legendary 3.5-mile stretch of road where speeds topped 200 miles per hour, something strange happened. Ickx's GT40 seemed to stutter. The engine note wavered. The car slowed slightly. From the Porsche cockpit, it looked exactly like what happens when a race car runs low on fuel after 24 hours of hammering. Herman, seeing his chance, pushed past the old lady and took the lead. And this is the part where things got very quiet in the wire pit. Because Ickx was bluffing. The old lady was fine. She had fuel. She had power. Ickx had faked the stutter to draw Herman out, to make the old German veteran think the race was already won. As the Porsche pulled ahead on the straight, Ickx tucked in behind it and rode the slipstream, letting the 908 punch a hole in the air while the old lady drafted along in its wake. Coming into the final group of corners before the start-finish straight, Ickx pulled out of the draft. He put his right foot down. The 4.9-liter V8 answered the way V8s do. The GT40 surged alongside the Porsche. Two cars, side by side, after 24 hours on the same piece of road, fighting for the last corners of the most famous race in the world. Ickx got there first. The old lady crossed the line. The winning gap was roughly 120 meters, about 390 feet, the length of a football field, give or take. After 24 hours of non-stop racing, through darkness and rain threats and breakdowns that wiped out 2/3 of the starting field, that was the space between winning and losing. It remains the closest real finish in Le Mans history. This was bigger than one car and one race. A 5-year-old machine entered by a tiny private team, driven by a 24-year-old and a guy who had never finished Le Mans, had just beaten the most costly and high-tech race cars ever built. Porsche had spent a fortune. Ferrari and Matra had put in millions. And the old lady, with her dated bodywork and her modest V8, outlasted every single one of them. Chassis 1075 became only the second car in history to win Le Mans twice. The first was a Bentley from the late 1920s. She did it in back-to-back years with completely different driver pairs, proving that the car herself was something special, not just the people driving her. In a sport where cars are often treated as throwaway tools, built for a single season and then swapped out, the old lady had come back and done it again when nobody gave her a chance. Ickx's career after that night reads like fiction. He won Le Mans 6 times, in 69, 75, 76, 77, 81, and 82. They called him Monsieur Le Mans for that. His record stood for decades until Tom Christensen passed it with 9 wins. He also won 8 Formula One Grand Prix races, took the Paris-Dakar Rally in 1983, and later helped Mazda pull off one of the biggest upsets in Le Mans history when their rotary-powered car won in 1991. He is still alive today, living in Monaco, the last living member of a group of drivers who raced without modern safety gear and lived to talk about it, and his walking protest changed the sport forever. The old Le Mans running start, the one that had been part of the race since the 1920s, was dropped for good after 1969, replaced by a rolling start the next year. Because a 24-year-old kid from Brussels stood up and said this is dangerous, and then proved it on the harshest stage you could imagine. The old lady sits in the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan today. She is owned by the Walton family and has never been put up for public sale. A sister car with a lesser racing history sold for $11 million in 2012. The GT40 auction record hit $13.2 million at RM Sotheby's in 2025. Chassis 1075, with her 2 Le Mans wins, her Gulf colors, and a story that still makes car people go quiet when you tell it, is thought to be worth somewhere north of $40 million. There are faster cars in the world. There are newer cars with more power, more tech, and shinier coats of paint. And then there is an old Ford in powder blue and orange that beat them all when she had no right to, driven by a young man who refused to run when everyone else was sprinting. Some cars earn their value on a showroom floor. The old lady earned hers on the Mulsanne Straight at 3 in the morning, with everything on the line. That is what $40 million sounds like when it crosses the finish line first.